Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for waiting. And I would like to thank you for taking the time once again to join Test House this afternoon for our live webcast. So today's session is on using Visual Studio Online for cloud load testing and application insights. So we will be presenting some of the features of Visual Studio Online. We will also be looking at a brief overview of application insights, then leading on to cloud load testing, and that's including a demo towards the end. I am proud to be joined by my colleague Valéry today, CTO at Test House, who will present the presentation for you. Today's webinar will be about 30 to 40 minutes, and then there's a Q&A at the end of the session. So before I pass you over to my colleague Valéry, please feel free to type in your individual questions on your Q&A pod below your slides. We will hopefully answer most of your questions if time permits. A full screen option is also available at the top of your screen, which will also be useful when Valéry will do his cloud load testing demo. So without further delay, I'll now pass you over to my colleague Valéry.
Thank you very much, Claire. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. Before I get started, maybe I will give you a bit of my background, and then we'll get started straight away. So I was involved in software testing about 10 years ago when I joined a company I actually didn't know about, which was called Mercury Interactive, but I soon discovered that actually they were a very successful company with testing tools such as WinRunner, QTP, and quality assurance tools such as the Test Director. So I kind of learned testing there, and after HBI, became an independent consultant for about 8 years, I believe, working on different projects, different companies, different technologies. And even around 2010, I was quite interested by another company who was developing some testing tools, and this company was Microsoft, so with Visual Studio 2010. And since then, I've been interested by Visual Studio, and I learned my way into using those tools. Since the beginning of this year, I joined the Test House as the CTO. And obviously, as you guessed, with my background, I have quite a good knowledge of Microsoft and HP tools, but also some other tools such as Selenium. I'm quite tool agnostic. So without any further delay, let's get started. So as Melanie summarized quickly a couple of minutes ago, so we're going to have a look at first Visual Studio Online, just to understand what it is and what we can get out of it. So it's just a brief overview, but it helps us understand what Microsoft is doing here. And we'll go a bit more in details of one of the features, which is called Application Insights. And we will see it's quite useful, specifically if you want to do performance testing in the cloud. So obviously the third item of the agenda will follow on cloud load testing. So it will be very brief, very quick, because we want to focus our attention over the demo. And once we finish, I will hand over back to Melanie, who will be leading the Q&A section. So first, let's get started with Visual Studio Online. Well, basically, Microsoft has developed a solution which allows you to take advantage of the cloud infrastructure to develop your applications. So things you're doing in-house within your premises can now be outsourced or moved to the cloud and allow you to save costs. So there's four main aspects to Visual Studio Online. So the first one is a source code repository. So instead of having your source code located on premises, you can now use Visual Studio Online to store your source code in a repository. So you can either use TS version control or Git. You can also manage your software development project online. So you can do what you would be doing with TFS within your premise. So you can create your backlogs, manage your sprints. You can create and manage your work items, being requirements, defects, tasks, and so on. And obviously you can track your work. So you have the Kanban board, and many other reporting facilities. Also, you have the ability to build your application in the cloud. So you no longer have to create a build controller, build agent. You can have it hosted in the cloud. So that's quite a handy feature as well. And lastly, you can also monitor your application. So once your application is ready, or even during testing, you can put in place monitors, and you can monitor various aspects of your application, as we will see shortly. So just a brief overview of those three first aspects. So in terms of source code, you can either use TFV version control or Git, which is fairly new to Microsoft Visual Studio. So basically, instead of having your source code managed in TFS on-premise, you have it in the cloud. And as you can see on this slide, it looks very similar of what you would be doing with your TFS instance. In terms of planning, management, and tracking, again, it's very similar to what you would have, specifically if you're using the web access. And even sometimes Visual Studio Online can be slightly ahead of the game. So there's something you may have noticed with the new release of Visual Studio, is they're providing updates about every 3 months. So they try to be very proactive in bringing new features to the end user, but they're also doing this with Visual Studio Online. But instead of bringing new features every 3 months, they're doing it every 3 weeks. So sometimes you have features coming online before they come in your Visual Studio FIC client, with Visual Studio or TFS. So here, as you can see, we can manage backlog items, and it's exactly the same view as you would see with your local TFS. And another example with a Kanban board. Lastly, which is, I think, new with 2013, you can manage your testing assets. You can create your test plans, your test suite, create test cases, and so on, using web access as well. So it has become quite a powerful tool, especially when using the HTML version of it. The third item I briefly explained was build. So again, instead of using local resources, having to set up a build controller and a build agent, you can leave this task to the cloud using Visual Studio Online, and it does it fairly well. Okay. So the fourth item, which is application insight, is more of an interest to us today. So we're going to have a bit more detailed look, and during the demo I will use some aspect of it. So just a bit of a warning here before I drill into the features. So it's currently in preview, so that means things may work, may not work, things may change, feature may change in the future, and also because the feature may change, it means whatever you build today may have to be amended with a future version. Hopefully, it won't be many changes. But the good side of it, it's currently free to use, so it's a good time for you to start using it and see if it's fit for your needs. So what is Application Insights? Application Insights provide 3 different aspects. It's actually 3 tools into one. One is for usage. So it helps you understand who is using your application and what they are doing with it. For instance, if you have a web application, you can see what page are being accessed, who is using which type of browser they're using, and so on. In terms of monitoring, so the second aspect is monitoring. You can measure the availability of your application. You can also monitor the performance of your application. And the last aspect is the diagnostics. So you can also uncover issues before the end user finds them. So you can have monitoring in place. With your monitoring in place, if anything goes wrong, you can have alerts automatically sent to you, and you can start investigating even before the end user discovers it. So you have like 3 tools into one, and basically to use it, it's quite simple. You have your application here, and obviously it's limited what type of application you can use, because you need to use the Insight SDK, but we'll see this in a minute. So you install the Insight SDK to your application, and then with Insight application Insight, you can start monitoring your server and also the activities on the client side. So on the client side, you will be able to monitor the client usage information. So this information is automatically sent by the client to the application Insight server. And on the server side, if you want, you can monitor the application behavior. So you can look at the availability. So the application Insight will take charge of this by regularly retrieving a page or a web service from your server and making sure that it's responding within a time frame with a valid result. And also the server can report back information about its state, such as CPU, memory usage, and so on. So those 3 features don't have to be enabled all simultaneously. If you're only interested with one, you have the capability to do that. So it's not all or nothing, it's mix and match. And obviously, all this information is now stored in Application Insight. You can view it using the dashboard, or if you have set up alerts, you can have emails automatically sent to you, making sure that you are up to date if anything goes wrong. So how to install it? If you're using Visual Studio 2013 Update 3, so it's not released yet. I think it's in release candidate, but it will be out shortly. You will not have to do anything for the SDK. It will be there out of the box. If you're using an earlier version of Visual Studio 2013, earlier of the Tron version with Update 2, you will have to manually install the Application Insight tools, and you can do it from Tools Extension Manager. This tool is available for ASP.NET, Windows Stores, or Windows Phone applications only at the moment. This might change in the future. Also, if you're using an earlier or previous version of Visual Studio, such as 2012 or Java, what you need to do is you go to Visual Studio Online, you have like a set of questions to answer, and it will give you a step-by-step instruction of what you need to do to enable Application Insights for those applications. So briefly, a couple of examples of what Application Insights provide. So in terms of usage, obviously you need to have an application which is compatible with that, so either a web-based application, Windows Phone or Windows Store app. And then what you can do is see how the application is being used, which pages are being viewed, what type of browser is being used by the end user, and so on. If you use the monitoring capability, there's 2 aspects. One is the availability side of it, which is very easy to set up. And what you can do is you can have Application Insight poll your server at a regular interval, and you can also do it from various locations. So that's quite handy if you want to make sure that your servers are available from the US or from Asia or from Europe. The second aspect of monitoring is to monitor your server. If you want to see what your server is currently doing, the CPU, and so on. So you can do this with a server which is hosted within your premises or which is in the cloud such as Azure. And there's the last aspect, which is diagnostics. If you're using logging technologies such as Log4net and Log or Trace Listener, you can automatically log this information back to Application Insight, and then in Application Insight you can see this information and you can easily drill down, search for specific events, like in this example where we say I want to see flow and database events. So it's quite handy if you want to be able to see your application performance. And this is another example here where we have exceptions. So if your application generates exceptions, they are automatically logged back to Application Insights. Okay, so that was quite a quick overview of Application Insights, but we'll see that it's quite handy when we do the cloud load testing, which is now our next item on the agenda. So basically this is how it looks like, how you can use or how you can do load testing online. So you have your Visual Studio. So obviously your Visual Studio has to be on-premise. You need to develop your web and load tests. And usually what you would have on your premises, you would have a load controller and a load agent, which would be testing your application. And your application could be hosted internally or in the cloud, for instance, using Azure. But using Visual Studio Online, what you can do is actually use a server load testing controller and agent, which is hosted on Visual Studio Online. So that's one side of it. And if you use Application Insight, you can automatically collect those metrics, information about CPU, the response time, server information that actually your load test would not capture. And then this information is sent back to Visual Studio, and you can have an aggregate view of what happened during your load testing. So I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide on how to quickly load test, like load testing online for dummies. So you have 6 steps. The first step is to create the test project. Second step is you create your web test. Third step, you create a load test, which is actually going to execute your web test following a load pattern. Optionally, you can decide to capture Application Insights information. That's not mandatory, but it's quite useful if you want further information. And then what we looked here at the first 4 steps is what you would be doing when you do a load test, a standard load test using Visual Studio. So this is where it differs from a standard one, and if you want to move online, you basically change your test settings to use Visual Studio Online load agents. And once you've done this, you just run your load test in the cloud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a demo using Fabricam Fiber, which is a demo available from Microsoft, and show you how easy it is to move in the cloud. Okay, so I'm going to start Visual Studio. So obviously, to be able to use Visual Studio Online, you need to have an account for that. But it's very easy to sign up for Visual Studio Online. Okay, and also what you have to bear in mind is you need Visual Studio Ultimate if you want to do load testing. Okay, so you don't need Ultimate for Visual Studio Online, but obviously for load testing, this tool is only available in the Ultimate edition. So if I follow the step-by-step guide I just mentioned, I'm just going to create a new project, which is a test web performance and load test. So far, nothing different from doing it in-house. Okay, so it's just asking me for a version control storage. That's fine, we don't specifically need this. And obviously that's step 1. So step 2 is now to create our web test. So I'm going to add new items to my test project. And those items are web performance test. Let's call it web test 1. And I'm going to go to an application I created and hosted on Azure. So the fact that it's hosted on Azure is not mandatory. It was just convenient for me. And I can start my test. So I go to tickets, I create a new ticket, provide some information, create a ticket, and then I delete it. Okay, so this is my test. So once I finish recording my web test, so there's some correlation which is happening. So it's just making sure that it can replay the test and see if there are variables which are reused throughout the test. So it's all done automatically. But in this instance, the test is going to fail because there's some parameterization which needs to be done manually. For instance, here we delete the item 21, so in the next run, item 21 becomes 22, and so on. So we need to parameterize this. So I'm not going to bother you with all that. I had it all prepared earlier. Just adding those 3 web tests. Okay. So now I have created my web test. I'm going to add a load test. Again, item 3 on my list. And when I create a new load test, I have a wizard where I can specify the type of scenarios I want to do. So I'm just going to do a basic step load pattern. Skip 10, no, 1 to 10. Let's skip the default test mix model. I'm going to add the web test. So a web test is nothing else than a business scenario. So in this example, ticket is creating a ticket. I'm also deleting the tickets, not to clutter my application with hundreds of tickets. Same here, I'm just creating customers, and get ticket details would be a support engineer would go to a ticket, look at the detail, and maybe start working on it. Okay, I'll leave the rest as the default. And I will just run this test for a couple of minutes. Here we go. So I created my load test. Step number 4, optionally I can use application insights. So you see here there's in new version of load testing, we have an application node here. So I just say I right click and select get performance data. It will connect to my application insight of my Visual Studio Online account. And it tells me that I currently have 3 applications set up. So one is Fabricam. So I already set up application insight for my application. So I just selected it. So step number 4 is done. So we're moving on to step number 5. So if I skip step number 5 and go straight to step number 6, I will just press run load test. And what happens is my load test is going to run locally. Okay? Because I have less than 200 virtual users, my load test can run straight out of the box with Visual Studio. And Visual Studio will act as a controller and the load agent. If I had more than 200 virtual users, then I would have to set up a load controller and eventually one or multiple load agents. Okay, so that's not the purpose of today's webinar, so I'm just stopping this test. Instead of that, I'm moving back to step 5. So my current test settings, actually it's here, so I'm just double-clicking on it. So what you can see in the general section, it says run test using local computer or a test controller. And what we want to do is to run it using Visual Studio Online. So I'm just selecting this option, applying the change, closing, and moving back to step 6. And what we can see is now instead of starting the load test locally, some activities are happening on the top. So basically it's sending the test to a Microsoft Visual Studio Online server. It goes to a queue, and once it's available for running, so obviously we're in a queue, once we move to the top position, the load test will start and will run according to our settings. So it's going to take a minute or so. So here we go. So we have some information on what's happening to keep us up to date. And as soon as the load test starts, the graph will appear. Hopefully fairly soon. Here we go. So the load test has started. And we're going to see some information populated back in a couple of seconds. There we go. Okay, so we have 3 sections. So one is performance, where we look at the response time. Then we have some throughput information, so number of tests which are being run per second, number of pages requested per second. We have also errors to see if something goes wrong, if either our web tests are incorrect or if the server is actually misbehaving by returning 500 errors or 404s or anything else that's not correct. And the last one is application. So we have this tab because we have application insights, and here it will provide information that application insights is capturing from the server. So the server is sending data back to application insights, and once the information is available, it's pulled back here for us to see. So this view will take a couple of minutes before it refreshes because the data has to go to application insights first. So while we're doing this, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of how to install application insights to your application. So I'm just opening my my web application, which is Fabricam Fiber. While it's doing this, I'm just going to go to my Visual Studio Online account. Okay. Loading. Okay, so when you create an account for Visual Studio Online, What you can see here, you have something called Try Application Insight. So this is where you manage your applications, where you want to collect application, where you want to use application insights. So if I select my Fabricam Fiber application, so that's the dashboard. So here this dashboard is customizable, but we can see information that's relevant for us. So for instance, we have availability, which I explained earlier. So if I go to the availability section, and to the Fabricam application, what we can see is the website is running and healthy. So everything is green, so that means no issue whatsoever. Just to give you an example where it goes wrong, here we go. So we have another server here, and it was restarted, so the application insight picked it up and obviously reported an error that actually it failed to reach the web server, the web application. So there's a lot of information here we can capture. So in terms of availability, you can request a specific page. But what you can also do is, instead of specifying a URL, you can specify a Visual Studio web test. So if I go to my project, sorry. Just going to select the ticket details. So here, instead of requesting a page, I'm going to execute a business scenario, and then you can specify which location you want to run it from. And you can set up alerts, so if 2 locations fails within 5 minutes, then you want to be sent an email. So here we go, get ticket details. And what we will see soon is a fully green dot telling us that the application is behaving properly. Okay. So moving back to the application. So this is the application, the web application, and what I did earlier is I selected, so once sorry, maybe it's easier to show everything. So from Nugget, you can install Application Insights tools, which I did earlier. So you can search here, and once you found it, you can install it. Once it's installed, you just right-click on your project, and then you will have Install Application Insight available here. But obviously, I've done it already. And what happens once you have installed Application Insights? 2 things will happen. One, it will create a config file. So here you can customize the behavior of Application Insights. And there's 2 modes. One is called production, and one is called development. So in development mode, you can collect more information. Obviously, in production, you want to be a bit less intrusive. And the second item that will happen is, if I can find it, at the config file, if you expand it, it will provide links for you to access the website directly. There it goes, so I just double-click, and it goes straight to your Visual Studio Online account. And there you go, here we see 3 green dots. So get ticket details web test was executed properly, and they did not fail on those 3 locations. So that's quite good information. So I'm going back to my load test. My load test is still running. So we can see that we have some information which is collected from application inside. So for instance, here is the CPU. So we see that we reached 64% CPU. Let's leave it for a couple of more minutes. Just going back to application insights. So again, performance information we just saw in the load test is sent by the server to application insight, so it's visible here. So I can see if I click on CPU here, I should be able to see the same information. Okay, I'm just zooming here, and we can see our load test did generate some load on the server. And we can also see other type of information such as usage. So also put some settings to collect information, user information. So we can see that, for instance, those are the page which are requested. Here's the page requested. We can also see which type of browsers is being used. Here we go. So 30% was Android, 70% Windows 8.1, and we can see various aspects of those clients, such as screen resolutions, eventually. Sorry, was working early. Okay. So the test has finished. It's currently collecting the test result. It might take a while. So, but basically, what's going to happen is once the result is available, we can download it. And once we've downloaded it, we can view, here we go, download report. And then when we view the test result, it's fairly similar to what we would see with a local load test execution. Let's use a report. And here we go. So if you use load testing before, you're very familiar with this view. Okay, so that was the demo for today. So hopefully you enjoyed this demo. And so as Test House, we have a range of skill sets which we can help you take advantage of. And if you enjoy this demo, you probably have further questions.
Thank you, Valéry. Thanks for that excellent presentation. As Valéry mentioned, we are now taking a few questions. If you can please type in your questions on your Q&A pod. Hopefully Valéry will try and answer most or not all the questions this afternoon before we finish the presentation. So please do type in your questions to Valéry now. Okay, I've got a few questions here, Valéry. So the first question is, can I load test an application internal to my company?
Obviously, if you want to use Visual Studio Online to run your load test, no, you cannot. Your application has to be visible from the internet because your cloud agent needs to be able to access your application.
Next question. Is it possible to test sites using IIS Windows authentication, e.g. SSL with basic authentication with the cloud-based agent?
Tricky question for me. I'm not sure. There's limitation in what you can do when you use this type of authentication. I'm not sure if it's possible.
Next question. Can we have requirements, program specifications, test plans, test cases, defects, and new requirements as full RTM with all the statistics?
I'm not sure I do understand the question. If you can rephrase it, that would be helpful. Yes, I'm not sure what you meant by this question.
Let's move into another question. Are the agents located on a physical machine?
No. The agents online are run from a virtual machine. However, when your load test is being executed, the virtual machine is dedicated to your load test.
Okay, next question. Can we set where the load agents are running from, e.g. Europe, US, Asia?
At the moment, as far as I'm aware, it's not possible. The servers are located in the US, so all your load tests are run from there. Hopefully, obviously, it would be very useful to be able to run it from various locations at the same time. So hopefully, Microsoft will deliver this in a future update.
Next question. Not every application is using ASP.NET. Is there any way we could benefit this application for web apps other than ASP.NET?
Okay, so two questions for me here. So looking at load testing, web and load testing. With web and load testing, you can test any HTTP-based or HTTPS-based application. So it doesn't have to be ASP.NET. It can be anything. It can be Java, PHP, and so on. In terms of application insights, you can do, if it's web-based, you can put some JavaScript code and see what the clients are doing for the client-side information. For the server-side information, for some Java-based J2E servers, you can get this information. And that's about it. Oh yes, and lastly, again, application inside, you can collect information from Windows Store and Windows Phone, Windows Mobile application. Bear in mind, Windows Mobile has a restriction. Is if it's a native application, then you cannot do it.
Next question. What kind of performance impact does application insights have on the application under test?
I haven't measured it personally, but the impact seems to be minimal, so I would reckon it's about 5 to 10% maximum.
Next question. How can I run load test locally and in the cloud from the same project?
Okay, so if you have a load test which is ready and you want to decide either to run it locally or from the cloud, you've seen earlier I edited a test setting file. So basically what you do is you switch from one to the other. I don't think I'm pretty sure you cannot run both together at the same time. So you cannot have your load test where it's splitting your load on Visual Studio Online and locally. But you could do two separate load test execution. One is running locally and one is running on the cloud.
A couple more questions and then maybe we'll take some of them offline, Valéry. Next question. What control we have over the online load controller and load agents? Can we tag or configure them?
The answer is simple. No control at all. They're fully managed by Microsoft. There's no access to those controller and agents, and there's no possibility to tag them. I'm just slightly lying. You can specify how many core you want to use. So I think there's a rule. I don't have the rule on the top of my head, but there's like you need a core every 25 users or something like that. But you can decide how many cores you allocate for your load test. But I think that's as far you can go.
Thank you very much, Valéry. If you do have any other questions, we will take them online. As Valéry says, the recording of the demo and also the slides for today will be available for us early next week, the earliest. Again, before we go, any other questions you wanted to ask Valéry, please do send them to me. My email address is on your slide right now. Thank you, Valéry, for a valuable presentation this afternoon, and hope to see you all once again at our next live session. Thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon.